In the winter of 1851, on the frigid docks of Memphis, a boy was sold at an illegal midnight auction. A boy so unnaturally beautiful that men in the crowd stopped breathing the moment he stepped onto the block. Witnesses claimed his presence bent the air around him, as though the world strained to carry his existence. Within 8 seconds, something impossible happened. 3 men in the crowd collapsed. One vomited blood. Another began screaming the Lord's Prayer backward before losing consciousness. The boy never spoke a word. He only stared. 2 weeks later, everyone who attended the auction either disappeared or killed themselves. Local newspapers erased the incident within a day. Church leaders denied the auction ever took place. Memphis authorities threatened anyone who asked questions. But a hidden document, buried in the sealed archives of the Shelby County Orphanage for Colored Youth, details the entire forbidden chain of events. It refers to the boy only as Subject Enoch. The orphanage's records say he was not born. They say he was found. Found where? The page is torn away. This is the forgotten story of Enoch, the most beautiful male slave ever traded in Memphis, whose existence lasted only 31 days, yet left behind a trail of madness, death, spiritual corruption, and an institutional cover-up that still poisons the city's foundations. This documentary is the first attempt to reconstruct the truth, and to understand why everyone who learned it tried to destroy it. The slave auction that night was not part of Memphis's official trade. It was held behind the abandoned Walter's cotton mill, owned quietly by the region's wealthiest church deacons. No lanterns were allowed, only torches, their flames trembling against the icy Mississippi wind. The auctioneer, Silas Red, kept glancing over his shoulder as though something monstrous watched the proceedings from the riverbank. The men who gathered were not regular buyers. They were plantation lords, seminary officials, wealthy widowers, and 2 physicians from the Memphis Institute of Anatomical Study. None of them should have been in the same place, but greed and curiosity united them. Red lifted a cloth tarp. The boy stepped out, barefoot, silent. He couldn't have been more than 16, but his beauty was unnerving, too perfect, too symmetrical, like a marble statue sculpted by a hand older than humanity. His eyes were calm, ancient, impossibly still. Men whispered he looked like an angel. Others murmured that he was a demon wearing a child's skin. One doctor fainted the moment he saw the boy's face. Red only said, "He was found in the forest. No marks. No history. No tongue." Gasps. Horror. Fascination. Bidding began. Within minutes, feverish competition erupted. 2 deacons argued violently. A plantation owner tried to draw his pistol. Another man whispered that the boy's mere presence made him remember sins he had buried for decades. The boy did nothing. He simply watched. And then, every torch flame bent toward him. The Holtons were a respected Memphis family, wealthy cotton growers, generous church donors, and pillars of the community. What the public didn't know was that behind closed doors, the Holtons ran one of Tennessee's darkest institutions, a private reform retreat for children deemed unruly, immoral, or unwanted by their families. Thomas Holton purchased Enoch for an unprecedented price, $6,000. In 1851, it was equivalent to buying an entire plantation. Holton later wrote a single line in his personal ledger. "He is not an asset. He is a necessity. No one knows why." When Enoch arrived at the Holton estate, the house servants refused to look at him. Dogs hid. Horses refused to let him near the stable. Mrs. Holton tried to approach him with a blanket. Before she could speak, she began weeping uncontrollably. She claimed it felt as though my dead mother was standing behind me, judging me. Enoch remained expressionless. That night, the Holtons' youngest daughter, 8-year-old Mary Ann, wandered into Enoch's room. She later told her brother, "His eyes have my dreams inside them." What did she mean? When asked again, she couldn't remember saying it. The next morning, the first tragedy occurred. Holton's oldest son, Andrew, was found at the bottom of the well, smiling. Enoch was standing beside it, looking down. Decades later, demolition crews renovating the abandoned Shelby County Colored Orphanage found a hidden compartment behind the director's office wall. Inside were hundreds of sealed documents, each stamped with the words, "Forbidden, by order of the church." The most disturbing among them was a binder labeled case file, Enoch, 1851. But the orphanage didn't exist in 1851. It opened in 1873. So why did they have files from 22 years earlier? The documents included sketches of Enoch's face, statements from Holton family staff, warnings written by church elders, medical measurements impossible for a human boy, a note reading, "Do not let him near children." A journal entry by Dr. Elisha Brandt, a seminary physician, described visiting the Holton estate after Andrew's death. The boy is untouched by grief. He shows no emotional understanding. His pupils reflect images that are not present in the room. Another document, unsigned, read, "Do not record his origin. Do not tell the families. Memphis is not ready." Even more chilling was an orphanage intake form dated March 1851, delivered to us by men who refused to give names. They claim the boy is a danger to the Holton family. But he is not a boy. God forgive us. But the Holtons never reported Enoch missing, and no record shows who delivered him. Someone erased that history deliberately. The death of Andrew Holton was officially ruled an accident, though no investigation was ever conducted. The family insisted he had slipped, but servants quietly whispered a different story. Andrew had been terrified for days, refusing to sleep, insisting something was following him behind his eyes. After Andrew's burial, the household descended into chaos. Mary Ann stopped speaking entirely, communicating only by drawing eerie charcoal sketches of Enoch, always with his eyes blacked out, his hands stretched toward her. Mrs. Holton developed violent tremors. Thomas Holton began drinking heavily, praying in the cellar late at night, repeating the same words. "The boy is watching God." On the third night, 3 servants fled the property. One left behind a note reading simply, "His shadow moves when he is still." The family's preacher, Reverend Claiborne, was summoned. After one brief meeting with Enoch, Claiborne demanded the Holtons return the boy to the men who sold him. But when they attempted to contact auctioneer Silas Redd, they discovered an unsettling truth. Redd had been dead for 4 days. His body was found in the river, eyes open, pupils dilated, arms rigid as though reaching towards something unseen underwater. Holton insisted they send Enoch away immediately, but for reasons unknown and never written directly, the boy did not leave the estate until something forced their hand. That something occurred on the night the Holtons' youngest daughter vanished. On February 3, 1851, Mary Ann Holton went to bed as usual. Her mother tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and placed her favorite porcelain doll beside her. Nothing seemed unusual, but sometime after midnight, Mrs. Holton awoke to a sound that would haunt her until the day she died, soft tapping, like fingernails sliding across her bedroom wall. When she lit a candle, the tapping stopped. The hallway stood silent. Yet when she opened Mary Ann's door, her breath froze. The bed was empty. The window was still locked from the inside, and the doll lay face down in the hallway, its porcelain head cracked in half. Thomas Holton and the remaining staff searched frantically. They combed the garden, the cellar, the woods behind the property. They screamed her name until their voices broke. Then they saw it. In the orchard, beneath the old pecan tree, stood Enoch. He wasn't holding Mary Ann. He wasn't looking at the house. He was staring straight upward, at the branches. Mary Ann was sitting on the highest limb, her nightgown fluttering in the cold wind, her expression strangely calm. She didn't seem frightened. She didn't even blink. Holton climbed the tree himself to retrieve her. But when he touched her, she whispered a single sentence into his ear, words he refused to repeat until 2 years later, when he finally confessed them to Reverend Claiborne. "He showed me where I used to be." Used to be where? Holton never answered. But that night, he signed the papers to surrender Enoch. Holton insisted on personally transporting Enoch to the Shelby County Orphanage. He hired 2 local sheriff's deputies to accompany him, though neither officer was asked to sign their names on any record. Enoch did not protest. He simply stepped into the wagon, sat down, and stared at the sky as though searching for shapes no human eye could see. Halfway to the orphanage, one of the deputies asked Enoch if he understood he was being taken somewhere new. Enoch blinked once, slowly. The deputy immediately clutched his chest, gasping for breath. He later swore he felt another heartbeat inside my ribs. The moment they arrived at the orphanage, its director, Margaret Weaver, refused to allow Enoch inside. She claimed she recognized him from somewhere she could not remember. Holton begged her to take the boy, insisting his family was in danger. The director reluctantly agreed, but only after forcing Holton to sign a confidentiality contract drafted by church officials. When they escorted Enoch through the orphanage corridor, the children in the dormitory began to scream. Some hid under beds. Others clawed at the walls, desperate to escape. One child, only 5 years old, fainted at the sight of him. Enoch simply looked at each child, one by one, as though searching for a familiar face. That night, Director Weaver wrote in her journal, "The boy arrived at dusk, and already my mind feels perforated." This was only the beginning. Within 48 hours of Enoch's arrival, the orphanage transformed into something hollow, diseased, and quietly collapsing. Food spoiled faster than it could be cooked. Milk curdled in sealed bottles. Wooden floorboards warped as though soaked in invisible moisture. Children complained of waking up unable to move. Some saw shadowy figures kneeling beside their beds. 3 infants became deathly ill with no clear symptoms, just a slow fading, as if something were draining the warmth from their bodies. Director Weaver confronted Enoch. She demanded to know what he had done. He didn't speak. He couldn't, but he touched her wrist. For the next 30 minutes, Weaver screamed uncontrollably, clawing at her own throat. When she regained control, she refused to document the incident. But a nurse recorded her whispering afterward. "He remembers us. All of us. Even before we were born." Staff began resigning in waves. Those who stayed claimed they couldn't sleep. One teacher went blind overnight. The chapel candles constantly flickered, even when unlit. A new smell filled the building, sweet, metallic, almost floral. One child described it as the smell of dreams dying. Enoch never misbehaved. He sat quietly in the corner of the playroom each day, staring at nothing or everything, no one knew which. But whenever a new person entered the room, he would look up, and for a split second, their face would reflect in his eyes as a different, older version of themselves. That was when the church stepped in. Concerned by rumors spreading from the orphanage, the Memphis Episcopal Seminary deployed a special committee known internally as the Watchers' Circle, a discreet group of theologians, physicians, and spiritual examiners. Their purpose was to investigate phenomena the church could not publicly acknowledge. The team arrived in plain clothes, claiming to be health inspectors. But their journals reveal a different mission: to determine whether Enoch was human. The Watchers conducted interviews, inspected rooms where children had fallen ill, and repeatedly attempted to examine Enoch. Each attempt failed. One priest reported, "The closer I am to him, the more my memories distort. I recall sins I never committed and forget prayers I have recited since boyhood." During the first interview, Enoch looked directly at Father Whitcomb. The priest immediately lost consciousness. Upon waking, he claimed he had seen a structure like a hall of mirrors extending into eternity. Another examiner tried to record Enoch's body temperature. The mercury burst inside the thermometer. The Watchers requested permission to remove the boy from the orphanage. Director Weaver agreed, but the church hesitated. They feared public attention. They feared scandal. But above all, they feared the unknown origin of this impossible child. A classified memo dated February 1851 reads, "This entity exerts psychological influence without intention. Removal may accelerate deterioration of affected subjects." In simpler words, moving him might make things worse. But things were already getting worse. 3 weeks after Enoch's arrival, every single child in the orphanage, 19 in total, woke simultaneously just after midnight and began screaming. Some clawed at their faces. Some banged their heads against the floor. Some whispered Enoch's name, even though none had been told it. The nurse on duty opened the dormitory door and froze. Every child was staring at the ceiling. Every child's eyes were dilated. And every child's mouth was open in the exact same shape, as though mimicking something unseen. When staff tried to comfort them, the children pushed them away violently. Several spoke in a cadence resembling adult male voices, uttering phrases that later matched scripture passages the children had never been exposed to. It lasted exactly 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Then silence. All 19 collapsed unconscious. Enoch was found standing in the hallway outside the dormitory, staring at the door. He did not appear distressed. He did not appear aware. His posture was stiff, unnatural, like a puppet left half raised by its strings. A watcher approached him. Enoch blinked twice, slowly. The watcher vomited blood and fainted. The incident was never reported to authorities. Instead, the church doubled down. Urgent orders declared. Subject must be isolated. Study must continue. No outside witnesses. But containment was already impossible. The boy's presence was unraveling more than the orphanage. It was unraveling reality around him. Terrified by the night of 19 screams, Reverend Claiborne insisted the boy was possessed by something older than Scripture. Despite church resistance, he secretly gathered 3 trusted clergy members and attempted an exorcism in the orphanage pantry, where the walls were thick enough to prevent sound escape. They surrounded Enoch, who sat on the floor, hands folded, expression blank. Claiborne recited passages meant to provoke any dark force. The boy did not react. Then Claiborne placed a hand on Enoch's forehead. That was when the screaming began, not from Enoch, but from the priests. One collapsed, clutching his ears. Another began laughing uncontrollably until blood trickled from his nose. Lights flickered. Shadows shifted. The room temperature plummeted. Claiborne later described what he saw in that moment. His eyes opened, but inside them I did not see pupils. I saw a reflection of myself 20 years in the future, kneeling before a grave I could not recognize. The exorcism ended abruptly when Enoch stood up and gently placed his hand on Claiborne's chest. The Reverend felt his heart stop, literally. For 10 full seconds, he was clinically dead. When it restarted, his hair had turned white. The church forbade further spiritual ritual. They insisted the boy was not demonic, just a phenomenon not meant to be interfered with. But Claiborne disagreed. He believed the boy was a mirror. A living mirror reflecting the deepest guilt, hidden sins, and future suffering of anyone who looked at him. And then, the deaths began. The first staff member to die was Nurse Abigail Rourke. She was young, newly hired, and had been visibly terrified of Enoch since the moment she saw him. But she also felt compassion, something many others had lost. One morning, she brought him a bowl of porridge. She whispered, "Do you want more blankets? Are you cold?" Enoch looked at her. Just looked. Abigail dropped the bowl. Her pupils shrank. Her mouth fell open. She backed away, whispering, "No, no, that isn't me. That isn't me anymore." The next morning, her body was found in the courtyard. She had drowned, despite there being no water. Her lungs were filled with river silt identical to sediment from the Mississippi. The watchers panicked. Director Weaver blamed Enoch and begged them to remove him. The church, however, made an astonishing statement. He did not kill her. She remembered. Remembered what? Her files were confiscated. Her journal disappeared. Her burial was conducted without ceremony. Later, it emerged that Abigail had been born in a riverside brothel, abandoned as an infant in a crate found floating downstream. Her mother had drowned the same night. Did Enoch show her that memory? Or something darker? Something from before she was alive? No one could answer, because the next deaths would shatter any remaining illusion that Enoch was merely strange. What happened next proved he was something the world should never have touched. Desperate to understand Enoch, the Watchers Circle devised a final test. They brought him into a small examination chamber formerly used to treat contagious illnesses. The room had no windows and only one exit. Their plan was simple: provoke a reaction, document it. They presented Enoch with objects designed to trigger emotional responses: childhood toys, religious symbols, photographs of the Holton family, even a mirror. Enoch stared blankly at each item, until they placed the mirror in front of him. He did not see himself. He saw something else. One witness reported. In the reflection, his face was older, much older, ancient, and behind him stood thousands of figures, all reaching forward. Enoch touched the mirror. The glass cracked outward, not inward, as though something behind it was pushing. Every watcher present screamed simultaneously. 2 collapsed. One suffered a stroke. Another clawed at his own skin, insisting, "They're coming through me." The mirror shattered completely. Enoch remained unharmed, standing in a circle of broken shards. After that, the church declared the experiment a spiritual contamination event. Orders were clear. Terminate the investigation. Terminate the records. Terminate anyone who spoke out of turn. But shutting down the study couldn't undo the damage, because the orphanage was now changing faster than anyone could control. And the children were no longer afraid of Enoch. They were drawn to him. Children who had previously avoided Enoch began gathering around him. They sat at his feet, touched his hands, and spoke to him in soft, dreamlike tones. None reported fear. Instead, they described him as warm, familiar, and like someone we knew long ago. They began drawing strange symbols, circles within circles, spirals, and branching patterns resembling roots or veins. These symbols appeared on paper, walls, bed frames, even in dust on the floor. No one taught them the shapes. Older children claimed Enoch visited their dreams. He never spoke. He only showed images. A forest filled with whispering trees. A shining river under a black sky. A city made of mirrors. A falling star that never stopped falling. The children called him the Rememberer. When asked what he helped them remember, they answered bizarrely. Where we were before. Where we're going back. The place where everything is one. The watchers panicked. Director Weaver demanded Enoch be transferred. Reverend Claiborne insisted he be destroyed. The church refused all proposals, claiming the boy was not malevolent, merely a disruption. But then the children began sleepwalking. They moved in perfect synchronization. They formed a ring around Enoch in the courtyard every night at 2:14 a.m., regardless of weather. And then they began disappearing. The first child to disappear was 7-year-old Jonah Price. He went to sleep in his bunk. By sunrise, his mattress was empty, but his blanket was neatly folded, and his shoes were placed beside the bed as though he had dressed himself and left quietly. There were no footprints, no open doors, no broken windows. Over the next week, 4 more children vanished in the same way. The orphanage started to empty one bed at a time. Investigators found only one clue, a faint shimmering residue on each empty mattress, something like fine silver dust. Samples were taken, but every sample jar shattered within minutes of sealing. Rumors spread that the children were being taken underground. Others said they were walking into the woods at night and never returning. But one surviving child, 9-year-old Martha, whispered the most disturbing theory. They went home. When asked what home meant, she pointed to Enoch. He sat alone, knees drawn to his chest, as though the vanishings pained him. But whenever questioned, he simply looked away. Sometimes he covered his ears. Director Weaver tried to alert the police. The church intervened before she could file a report. They told her, "The children are not missing. They have been reclaimed." Reclaimed by what? By whom? No one would answer. 2 nights later, Martha vanished too. That left only 7 children alive, and 6 of those would not survive the final week. By March 1851, the orphanage had become unrecognizable. Walls seemed to bow inward. Windows fogged permanently from the inside. Doors refused to stay open. Staff who remained worked with trembling hands, haunted eyes, and unspoken terror. One teacher wrote in her final note before fleeing, "I keep hearing children laughing in rooms that are empty." Enoch began to change as well. His skin grew paler. His hair darkened. His eyes seemed deeper, pools reflecting not light, but memory. He no longer sat quietly. He wandered the halls, touching walls, tracing strange shapes onto his arms and neck. The watchers attempted to move him, but the moment they touched him, the corridor lights went out. When they flickered back on seconds later, one watcher was missing. His shoes remained. His shadow remained. But his body had vanished. Director Weaver tried again to alert authorities. This time, the church removed her from her post and replaced her with a silent, stone-faced bishop who arrived without luggage or explanation. He ordered the building sealed. No one in, no one out. But the building was already sick. And on March 11th, the sickness infected every child simultaneously. They began bleeding from their noses, ears, and eyes. They convulsed, screaming Enoch's name. They pointed to the basement, because something had awakened beneath the floorboards. The orphanage basement had always been off-limits. Old coal rooms, abandoned storage, rusted pipes, but nothing extraordinary. Or so people believed. During the children's final convulsions, they pointed downward repeatedly. Staff carried lanterns and descended into the basement, searching for anything unusual. They found claw marks, hundreds of them, covering the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. But these were not made by children. They were deep, too deep. Enoch followed them down without being invited. His breathing changed. For the first time, he seemed afraid. He approached a section of wall where fresh claw marks formed a circular pattern. He placed his palm in the center. The stone sank inward, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside was an object wrapped in decayed cloth. A cradle. Old. Much too old. Director Weaver gasped. She recognized it. It was the same cradle she herself had been found in as an abandoned infant. Other staff members stepped forward. They recognized it too. It was the cradle from their own infancy. Impossible, yet unmistakable. Enoch knelt beside it and touched the wood. The walls began to pulse like a heart. Dust rose in columns. Shadows folded inward. Everyone heard a sound no human throat could produce. A low, rumbling, ancient whisper that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. And Enoch lifted his head. For the first time, a tear rolled down his cheek. Something had returned. Something older than Memphis. Older than America. Older than humanity. That night, the remaining 7 children gathered around Enoch in the courtyard. They held hands, forming a circle. Their faces were calm, serene, almost joyful. The sky above the orphanage darkened unnaturally. Stars blinked out. A cold wind whipped around the building in spirals, pulling leaves, dust, and fragments of memory like images into the air. The bishop ordered everyone inside. No one moved. Enoch looked upward and raised both hands slowly. The children copied him. Director Weaver tried to intervene, but the moment she stepped toward them, she felt a crushing pressure on her skull, like invisible hands squeezing her mind. The children began whispering something rhythmic. Not English, not any known language. It sounded like breathing shaped into words. Then, they vanished. All 7, blinking out like candle flames in a storm. Enoch turned toward the adults. His body began dissolving into soft, shimmering particles, the same silver residue found on the empty mattresses. He walked toward the front gate. With each step, more of him broke apart. By the time he reached the road, only his face remained. He looked back once, as if apologizing. Then he was gone. The wind died. The sky cleared. The orphanage fell silent. The church erased everything. All records. All testimonies. All lives connected to that night. But memory is not so easily contained. Especially memories that do not belong to this world. Within 12 hours, the church deployed a covert cleanup team. The orphanage was cleared, sanitized, and sealed. Anyone who witnessed the events was forced to sign a binding oath under threat of imprisonment, or worse. Newspapers were paid to publish fake stories about illness outbreaks and structural collapse. Parents of the missing children received letters forged by clergy, claiming their children had been relocated to a northern charity. All of it lies. Documents recovered by modern archivists reveal the truth. The church knew about beings like Enoch long before 1851. The Watcher's Circle had decades, possibly centuries, of records describing memory-born children, entities that appeared during periods of mass trauma, war, or social upheaval. They were not ghosts, not demons, not angels. They were something else. Some files suggested they were manifestations of collective suffering. Children formed from the memories of the abandoned, the enslaved, the forgotten. Others suggested they were the remnants of civilizations older than recorded history. But one line appeared in every document. Do not let them bond with human children. The Memphis orphanage had broken that rule, and the cost was catastrophic. The building was demolished. But people in the neighborhood still reported strange sightings. Children walking in the fog at dawn, whispering prayers older than language. And once, in 1904, an old woman claimed she saw a boy standing near the river. Beautiful, silent, watching the water. He had Enoch's face. This documentary reconstructs what the church tried to erase. But some questions remain unanswered, and perhaps should remain unanswered. Who, or what, was Enoch? A child formed from centuries of suffering? A prophecy of America's darkest sins given human shape? A tear in the boundary between memory and flesh? Or was he something older, something the land itself remembered long before people walked it? Every witness agreed on one thing. Enoch was not evil. He was inevitable. A mirror reflecting what humanity refuses to face. Its cruelty, its buried guilt, its forgotten children. The disappearances, the deaths, the vanishing of the children, none were acts of violence. They were acts of return. Return to whatever birthed them. Return to a place where memory is not linear, but eternal. The church silenced the truth. The city buried the story. But stories like this do not die. They resurface when history repeats itself. And today, across America, hundreds of abandoned institutions, orphanages, and reform homes still carry the same quiet whispers. Some report seeing a boy with ancient eyes. Some hear children chanting in the night. Some find silver dust on empty beds. Maybe Enoch was the first. Maybe he was not. But if you ever walk alone in Memphis at night, and you feel a sudden chill, and you see a child watching you with impossible calm, do not look into his eyes, because he will remember you, and then you will remember him forever.